Let's travel back in time all the way to the 19th century. Back then, our understanding of biology and science was pretty limited. If you would have seen the procedures back then, it would have drove you mad. Most of the times, diseases were treated through bloodletting. There was no such thing as an anesthetic yet, and so most of operations were happening to you and you would have to feel and go through excruciating pains. And besides that, we didn't understand where diseases come from. Back then, we had ideas that they were passed on through bad smells or things of that nature. If you would have gone there, pretty sure you would have gone crazy and would have thought this is barbaric. But luckily, you wouldn't be alone. You would find a very likely ally in Ignaz Semmelweis. Ignaz Semmelweis was a Hungarian physician, and he worked in one of the first maternity wards in Vienna. What he noticed after working there for some time is that the mortality rate in that maternity ward was 3 times bigger than that of regular midwife wards. And he came up with a hypothesis. His hypothesis was that most of the deaths were related to childbed fever. And it was passed on from mother to mother because doctors didn't have the habit of washing their hands and cleaning their tools after finishing with one patient and moving to the other. This today sounds like common sense, of course, but that's not what the opinion of the medical community was back then. Most doctors were offended. They said things like, "How dare you tell me to do my job? Because I know how to take care of my patients. I know what to do. And you're telling me that I should wash my hands and be sanitary? Who do you think you are to impose on me your way of doing things?" He was mocked. He was laughed at. Most of the established scientific community and medical community isolated him and considered him a kook because he didn't bring forward enough scientific evidence. Unfortunately, even though Semmelweis posted a lot of open letters trying to get people to reconsider, he was not taken seriously. He also grew bitter, and in the last years of his life, he became very angry. Unfortunately, at one point, he was also sent to an asylum where he was beaten up by the guards and 14 days later died of an infection because of those beatings. Very few people attended his funeral, and not that many people cared about his ideas. The person that replaced him in the ward decided to not apply these sanitary measures that he talked about, which brought the mortality rate to almost 1%. And because of that, the mortality rates rose back up to around 6 to 7%. And nobody protested. It took about 10 to 20 years for the ideas of Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister to make antiseptic procedures a common practice in the medical community. And since then, we haven't looked back. But please take a minute to consider how many lives were lost because of this ignorance, because of not accepting this simple change in procedures. Unfortunately, today, some of us mock to a great extent the idea of wearing masks and keeping a safe distance in public during the COVID-19 pandemic. Similarly to the doctors and the medical community back then, we feel to a certain extent insulted. We are looking at this as a limitation of our rights, and we feel offended that we are asked to do something like this. But think about it. If at any point in our lives we have to choose between our egos and not putting someone else's health at risk, even if that risk is small, we shouldn't hesitate to choose the latter. Wearing a mask in public and keeping a safe distance is not an dictatorial act of limiting your rights. It's an act of empathy and solidarity to the more vulnerable of us. And this is what will actually help us get out of the situation quicker. The quicker we act, the quicker we all agree to taking these simple steps, the easier it will be for doctors and experts and people on the front lines to manage the situation and make sure we come back to the life we all miss. So please, stay safe, wear a mask, keep a safe distance, and trust the recommendations of doctors and experts. We can only get through this if we act together. Thank you. See you next time.